Apple isn't just a content company. They have a whole other side business. I think I learned I could not help them, right? In the way that I think maybe I had been able to help Comedy Central. But I think in their determination, I could hurt them.
So yesterday, Jon Stewart joined a podcast called The Town to finally explain why he and Apple faced irreconcilable differences over Stewart's Apple TV Plus show, The Problem with Jon Stewart. The show ran for just 2 seasons, and according to Stewart, that was at least in part because of an interview with former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers that aired in the 2nd season. Here is Stewart explaining why he wanted to talk with Summers.
Thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish anything. Support our work and join us at tyt.com/team.
When I realized it was South there was an interview with Larry Summers, and I had the idea that using the Fed to whip inflation was ignoring the fact that so much of inflation is corporate profit. And, the Fed is a blunt tool. And you've got all these, and Larry Summers was very big on the Fed has to cut interest rates. And if that means we go into a recession and, hey, 10 million people lose their jobs, but, hey, utilitarian approach. I was saying corporate profits and earnings calls, here is the Fed calling for because they called it wage inflation. Workers were doing too well after the pandemic. And so they were going to raise interest rates to cool down the wages. And I was saying, but what about corporate profits? This really doesn't do anything to address how they've been killing it.
So Stewart's confrontation with Summer was actually a little dramatic. So here's how it all went down.
So he says, very Larry Summers way, this is going to be on Apple, yes? Apple television. Yes, sir. And Apple, their profits during the pandemic, I believe they gained. And he had all the figures, man. It was like $2 trillion in market cap, $15,000 for every man, woman, and child. In America, would you suggest that Apple is gouging? And I go, yeah. But then he hits me with, so are you suggesting, sir, that Apple should not be within their rights to charge whatever they could get for their phones, given that the tightening of the market? And I said, no, I am absolutely suggesting, but let's flip that around. I'm saying, why can't workers do the same? The market conditions have constricted to such where workers can demand a higher wage.
So Stewart eventually actually got Summers to admit that raising interest rates hurts workers. And according to Stewart, the interview was a hit. It was a hit with everyone except for the Apple executives.
Finally, he concedes raising interest rates softens. We play the interview for the audience. They explode like we just hit a 3-pointer at the buzzer. And the Apple executives walk into the dressing room afterwards with a look on their face. And I was like, oh my God, did the factory explode? Like, what happened?
Oh no.
And they go, are you gonna use that Summers thing? And so we went back and forth for a couple of weeks before the show aired about that particular moment. It was then that I realized, oh, our aims do not align in any way.
But despite all of that, Stewart insists that he was not censored and that is just what working for a big corporation is like.
I don't consider this like they didn't censor me. It wasn't free speech. Like when you work for a corporate entity, that's part of the deal. Like even at Comedy Central, like the deal is I get to do what I want until they think it's going to hurt their beer sales or whatever it is that they want to sell. And that's the deal we all make. Nobody is owed a platform. And when you're in somebody's house and they want you to take your shoes off, you take your shoes off or you go to somebody else's house.
So, this is the position that a lot of content creators find themselves in. We're given these platforms where we're told we can create the sort of content that we would like to, where we can be our own bosses and have some kind of autonomy over the work that we do. But we're all still beholden to some kind of overlord, whether that's a giant media corporation like Apple or a giant corporate algorithm. So, first of all, is any of this surprising? And secondly, is there any way around this sort of thing apart from, maybe creating your own network? Cenk, I'm sure you have some thoughts here.
Yeah, well, I kind of did. So look, I have a personal experience from MSNBC on this. So first of all, in my book, I wrote, Justice is Coming, I wrote about MSNBC when they were owned by GE. And so as usual, Jon Stewart's 100% right here. So GE was a giant defense contractor. And when the Iraq war started, they made billions on top of billions of dollars, not just from military contracts, but also power contracts they got with the new Iraqi government, et cetera. So before the Iraq war started, they fired everyone who was against the Iraq war that was on their air. So they fired Phil Donahue, Jesse Ventura, they moved Ashley Banfield's office into a closet. So I got a whole chapter on that, tyt.com/justice. We'll put the link down below in the description box. You could read that all for yourself, because GE made so much more money from those defense contracts than they did from the good ratings that Phil Donahue got. And then when I was at MSNBC as an anchor, both sides of what Jon Stewart are saying is right. So for example, they objected to me criticizing a corporation that was apparently one of their advertisers, right? So we compromised on that. I kept it in the script, but I moved it lower in the script, which I don't think it hurt at all. But I got it. I understand that's one of their advertisers. That's how they make money. I don't like that policy, but it is their house, as Stewart says. Having said that, at some point you draw a line, as he did and I did. So when MSNBC basically told me don't criticize Democrats or really anybody in power, because I yelled at a former Republican congressman because he was trying to cut Social Security, and they didn't like that either. So they said, oh, we have problems with your tone with people that are in power. Well, that's what I do. I try to hold the powerful accountable. So that's why I came back to Young Turks. I left MSNBC, and that's why Jon Stewart left Apple. But you should know that those are influences that are very real in media. And look, anywhere where you work has rules, and a lot of rules for good reason, right? So there's sexual harassment rules that Elon Musk ignores, but that's a different story. Okay, but seriously, there's rules, and I hope most of them make sense, but some of them, yeah, are for the benefit of not you or even what you do within that corporation, but for a larger profit center that they have at that company. And when you look at this particular issue, when Apple raises prices and their market cap goes up by $2 trillion, they're not going to care at all whether Jon Stewart has the best show on Apple TV or has the worst show, because the amount of money they make from Jon Stewart is peanuts compared to the problem that he's pointing out. So that's their corporate interests, and that's the reality of media. Trey.
Yeah, I mean, you all both covered it pretty well. I mean, I agree, it's not really anything new. I mean, there's, corporate overlords have been muzzling comedians in particular since time immemorial. There's countless stories you hear, even for stuff like comics doing a Tonight Show set, and it's got to be clean. You can't be, sexually explicit or say 4-letter words, and everybody knows that. But then the producers will tell him like, hey, we can't do this McDonald's bit and whatever. And he's like, that's family friendly. They're like, yeah, but McDonald's is a big sponsor, so you're gonna have to cut out the McDonald's bit. I mean, I don't know if this was ever confirmed, but it's been generally accepted for years that one of the main reasons Norm Macdonald, who was killing it at the time, got fired by SNL in the 90s was because he refused to stop making fun of O.J. Simpson, who was good friends with a high up executive at NBC. So like, this stuff's been going on forever. Stewart, obviously, I mean, he acknowledged that it is kind of just, something you have to deal with or not, because I think this has a lot to do with the popularity of podcasts and people doing their own thing like Cenk has done and like a lot of comics have done. And yeah, with the podcast, you have advertisers, but in my experience, it's not like that. They can either they can watch what you do and either choose to endorse you or not from the very beginning. And in my personal experience, they don't give any kind of like creative notes. They don't push back generally. So it's kind of a little better as far as that goes. But it's just, it's all in the game. I mean, it sucks. It's not cool, but it's just how it works,
Yeah, I actually have another story, but there's one thing that you should take away from this that's really, really important. So when I was a TV writer, I worked on a pilot of a show where they were going to recreate incredible movie stunts, but in real life on TV. I always laugh at that because, like, guys, it's not real life; it's TV. So the point of the show is like, it has no point. It's totally senseless. But anyway, my job as a writer, and I was, believe it or not, a comedy writer at the time. And I finally landed one joke. I don't think I was a good comedy writer at all, but I got one good joke about Kevin Costner in the Waterworld stunt that they were going to do. And everybody in the writer's room laughs, the producers laugh, and then the executive producer says, "Oh man, that was great, Cenk. All right, take it out." I was like, what? It's like the only good joke I've ever written. Okay. And he's like, yeah, but that could offend Kevin Costner, which could offend the studio, and then that way we don't have the rights to air the scene from the movie, and so we can't have it. Well, look, that's why people on TV look like fakes and phonies, because they have all these things that they're constrained by, and powerful forces above them that where there's more money involved. And the part where it's really serious, he said that's why they're so nice to the politicians and pretend that they're having real debates and have ideologies when they're all a bunch of crooks that take donor money. But if they told you that, then the politicians wouldn't come on their air. They'd lose access to the politicians, which they want. Plus, the most important thing is, where does TV news make the lion's share of its money? Money in politics. The money goes to the politicians, and then the politicians give it to the TV stations and the newspapers to run ads. So since they're the largest benefactor of the corruption in Washington, that's why TV news never ever talks about corruption.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a catch-22 as well, because you have the mainstream media and you have we know about the advertisers, we know about the donors and things like that. So you kind of expect, I think Cenk mentioned like a lack of authenticity there. And that's why I think so many social media commentators started to spring up, especially once YouTube became a thing, because there you could have that authenticity that you were missing from what you were getting on television. But then inevitably, as those platforms started to grow, you started to get more and more money in those platforms, and then you start to have a repeat of the same cycle. So then the creators are caught in a position where it's like, I need the money to grow, I need the advertising dollars so that I can do this kind of work, but I'm going to have to compromise some of that authenticity just so I can stay here. So it's like you have to find that balance between what can I say and how can I still be authentic and still get my message across without alienating my advertisers. So it's kind of tricky in that sense.
Oh, it's super tricky. I mean, we do a lot of things to try to prevent being influenced by advertisers, because at TYT we're perfectly aware of that phenomenon, and as hard as we try to not to be influenced, you have to set up the right infrastructure so that it prevents you from being influenced. That's why we try to get subscriptions, because then if we're funded by the audience, then we have to serve the audience rather than serving the advertisers. And if you then piss off your audience and by being inauthentic, they leave and you make less money. Then we've aligned our interests with the audience's interests, right? And even on the ads, we have the platform sell it, so we don't know which advertisers are going to run the ads, so we don't owe them a thing. So we try to structure it to make sure that we avoid those pitfalls. I don't see a lot of other media companies bothering to do any of that. Like they're just like, just give us the money, we'll do ads for you, and we'll pretend you're awesome. So yeah, so just buyer beware. It's a giant problem in media, and it's a lens that distorts everything that goes through it. And that lens is about money and power. And that's just the reality. And as usual, Jon Stewart is a rare truth teller that has found a way to get through that media obstacle course and still deliver the truth to you guys and be funny at the same time. That's a rare, rare bird. He should run for president in 2028. Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us, become a young Turk.